Good day to all. My name is Thomas Robinson, and in this documentary, I will document, evaluate, analyze, and reflect on the effectiveness of four literacy strategies used within my lessons. The two lessons that I taught were the language arts lesson, parts of speech, and the literature lesson, the plot. The strategies used within the lessons were graphic organizers, word walls, graphic aids, and reading response journals. The grade levels for these lessons were a seventh grade middle school class at S.E. McPherson Junior High School. These students performed within the upper percentile of their peers. So we'll start off with our first lesson, parts of speech. Students learned and revisited the 8 parts of speech, which are nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, interjections, and prepositions. The objective for the lessons were students will be able to list the 8 parts of speech, write 5 sentences containing the 8 parts of speech, identify the roles of each part of speech, and analyze sentences to determine which parts of speech are being used. The lesson was introduced with a video from flowcabulary.com. Parts of speech.
Yeah, it's Flowcab. Parts of speech. It goes noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. Nouns are people, things, and places, ideas and concepts. So face it, your face is a noun, your name is a noun. I see nouns all around when I roll through the town. Chris, sidewalk conversation, kitten, popcorn, and some patience. Unicorn dreams, shoelace kings. Nouns are ideas, people, places, and things. A verb expresses action like I see, or a state of being like the verb to be. So we sing, you sang, he sings songs. We brought her, you should bring him along. Adjectives, that's where the magic is. They modify a noun or a pronoun. Wow, the big bad wolf had hairy paws, sharp little teeth, and scary claws. It goes noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. Pronouns replace nouns a little bit. Instead of a specific thing, you could use it, or me, or mine, or you, or we, or that, or this, or hers, or she. Wanna quickly modify a verb? You really need an adverb, you heard? You can usually take an adjective and add ly, so we easily won the game last night. The prepositions in a sentence are the links like on, in, at, upon, and against. Prepositions tell you where and when. Go up by the rock to see all of your friends. And, but, or, those are conjunctions. They link up phrases, that's their function. Yet they, no, don't forget interjections, yo. They interrupt things like hey or whoa. It goes noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. It goes noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb, pronoun, preposition, conjunction, interjection. Pardon me, we're running through the parts of speech.
The first strategy used within this lesson is the word wall. In this word wall, you can see the 8 parts of speech listed. This will then serve as a reminder to students. Word walls are a part of literacy strategies that comprise of words which are usually displayed in large visible letters on the wall. bulletin board, or other display surfaces in the classroom. So if we take a look at our word wall, we have the parts of speech. We have verb, which is a verb is an action word, a pronoun, which replaces a noun in a sentence. A noun names a person, place, thing, or idea. Adjective, an adjective is a word that describes a noun or pronoun. Adverb, preposition, interjection, or conjunction. So let's talk about strategy 1, the word wall, and how students were able to use it in this lesson. Excellent, students. Okay, so parts of speech. Who remembers anything from parts of speech based on what you've learned in primary school? Can someone volunteer and share?
Yeah, so I learned parts of speech involved, like the video I just watched, like noun and pronouns. And nouns mean like a person, place, or thing. And we can use different parts of speech in our writing as well.
Excellent, Tanisha. Does anyone else want to take a guess? Okay, good job. So let's take a look at our word wall. We have verbs, pronouns, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, interjection, and conjunction. So the importance of our word wall is because this literacy strategy comprises of words which are usually displayed in large visible letters on a wall, in the classroom. So students, you want to take a look at these words to get familiar with the definitions. So throughout the lesson were other strategies to keep students engaged, like TikTok videos to help students understand what is a verb. Also, Facebook posts to recap the 8 parts of speech. So let's take a look at the TikTok. Okay, verbs. Want to know where all the action is? Verb is the word. A verb is an action word. Some words that show action are dance, walk, eat, pray, swim, sleep, and many more. So let's watch TikTok television. What are the children doing in this video? What are the children doing in this video?
They are dancing.
Yes, and why would dancing be a verb?
Because
It's an action word.
Very good, students. Now let's take a look at our Facebook post. Take a look at the Facebook post. Let's determine nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. My friend Sheila is taking me to the movies and McDonald's tomorrow. She is so fun to hang with. So can someone point out a noun in this Facebook post?
McDonald's.
Yes, because it's a place.
Sheila.
Yes, because it's the name of a person. Very good. So can someone point out a pronoun in this Facebook post? And I'm looking at 2 as we speak. I'm looking at 3 actually.
She.
She.
Correct. Also, we have my, and we have me. Okay, very good. So let's take a look at a verb. Can someone find a verb in this Facebook post? And remember, verbs are action words or state of being.
Fun.
No, fun wouldn't be the verb in the sentence, but good try.
Taken.
Yes, taking would be the verb because taking is an action word. Adjectives. Can someone find an adjective in this Facebook post?
I think fun would be the adjective, right?
And you are correct. Fun is the adjective. And okay, so the second strategy used was graphic organizers. Presented on the PowerPoint was a picture of a pizza. The teacher, which is myself, would then ask students to give examples of the 8 parts of speech which would substitute as toppings for a pizza. Graphic organizers are the visual displays that illustrate the relationship between facts, terms, and ideas within learning tasks. So let's use our graphic organizer with the 8 parts of speech. So we're going to make a pizza and we're going to add toppings to our pizza. Can someone give me an example of a noun? Anyone can volunteer?
It could be about anything, Mr. Robinson.
Pardon me?
Can it be about anything?
Yes, anything. Remember, this is
Okay,
our
I'll say-
pizza, so we're going to add toppings to our pizza.
Book.
Yes, very good. Can someone give me an example of a conjunction?
What?
Very good. How about an interjection?
Hooray.
Very good. And lastly, a verb.
Talking.
Very good. So we are at the end of our lesson. Can one brave student raise their hand and tell me what they've learned about parts of speech in 30 seconds? It can be anything that you've gathered from this PowerPoint. So the lesson then came to an end and students were asked to volunteer what they've learned about parts of speech in 30 seconds. Following this was an assessment that took place on quizzes.com and homework. For homework, as stated in the objectives, students were to write 5 sentences using the 8 parts of speech. My evaluations and reflections would have to be that students were really engaged and the strategies worked well with them because they were able to relate. I felt as if the lesson flowed easily and the students caught on swiftly. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our second lesson, the plot, which is our literature lesson. So the second lesson was a literature lesson, elements of a story, the plot. The plot is one of the 5 elements of a story. A plot is a sequence of events that occur in a play or a story. So the objectives. The objective for the following lesson is students will be able to define what is a plot, identify the elements of plot in a story, demonstrate a plot structure by analyzing short stories, and create a plot diagram. So this lesson started with an introductory video from Flowcabulary and a mini lesson explaining to students the definition of plot.
A plot's not anything but a sequence of events. And every story has a plot, because a story without a plot is like a fish out of water. Or like pancakes without syrup. Or like a shoe without some laces. You wouldn't wear shoes without laces, would you? Would you? You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup. That's the conclusion. Make your plot hot and you're never losing. Let's take a second now to focus on plot. You wanna learn to tell a cool story or not? The beginning of the story is the introduction. We get to meet the characters, find out something about the main conflict or main problem. We're dying to know how the characters will solve them. The conflict unravels in 3 phases. Rising action is the first stage. It's the middle of the story where you build suspense. Whatever the problem is, it gets intense until the turning point hits. That's called the climax. The character changes, accepts new facts, and may have to make a choice based on what happened. The tension decreases, that's the falling action with the conflict resolved. You can wrap up loose ends in the last section that we call the conclusion. You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup. That's the conclusion. Make your plot hot and you're never losing. Let's break down the plot of a story called The Date, with two characters who are not the same. In the introduction, Joe says he's not popular. That's an important fact about his character. The conflict, he wants to date a popular girl. Her name is Lisa and she's out of this world. She only dates jocks, but he still makes the offer when he asks Lisa out on a date to Red Lobster. She says yes, and the plot thickens. The rising action adds a little tension, but then Joe is grossed out by the way she chooses the climax. That information is new. It's a turning point for Joe and things change after. Their relationship ending is the falling action. So the resolution to this conflict or conclusion is Joe and Lisa didn't stick. You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier. The climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup. That's the conclusion. Make your plot hot and you're never losing.
Elements that make up a story. Plot is one of those 5 basic elements. The plot is a term for the main events in the story. The main events happen in a certain order, and so the plot is sometimes also referred to as the storyline. Looking at it more closely, the plot can be further broken down into 5 parts. It's helpful to imagine those 5 parts as a roller coaster ride. The first part of the plot is called the exposition. The exposition is simply the beginning of the story. Here, the author introduces the characters and establishes the setting. The next part is the rising action. This is where the conflict of the story is revealed. During the rising action, the main character encounters some sort of problem that creates tension, such as when the wolf blows down the little pig's house. The climax is the next part of the plot. It is the most exciting part of the story and the point where there is a change in the direction of the story and its course of events. In The Three Little Pigs, this would be when the wolf gets frustrated and tries to enter the brick house through the chimney. The next part is the falling action. It occurs right after the climax. The tension from the conflict starts to decrease and the story events wind down or settle toward an end. The falling action in The Three Little Pigs is when the wolf lands in the hot soup pot and gets burned. The last part of the plot is the resolution. Here, the problem of the story is solved and the story ends. In The Three Little Pigs, this is when the wolf runs away and disappears into the forest.
Created using
Next, this lesson would follow by a read aloud from the Department of Education entitled No Show. As the lesson progresses, the plot was broken down into its characteristics, functions, and elements. Next, students were able to put it all together with a word diagram to assist with keeping a sequential order of the plot. So a plot is the sequence of main events that occur in a play or story. Functions of plot. One of the most important parts of the story. It focuses on important characters. It connects events in an orderly manner. It maintains readers' interest, and it allows readers to get emotionally involved. So a plot is so important because it makes a connection within the story. It shows you what happened from the beginning, what's taking place in the middle of the story, and what's going to happen at the end of the story. So pay close attention to the word connect, because in the topic plot, there's a lot of connection going on. So characteristics of plot. A plot must be whole or complete, and a plot must be simple or complex. So you can never have an incomplete plot. A plot must be simple or complex. Either your plot is simple and gets to the point, or it's complex and it takes a few steps to get to the point. So words to look out for when finding a plot: beginning, middle, end, or first, second, third. And all of these words will help you to make the connection. Awesome words. So elements of a plot. There are 5 elements of plot. They are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So let's talk about exposition. This is the introduction to a story, the characters, setting, and primary conflict. So this is where you're introduced with the setting. This is where you're introduced with everything what's going on in the story or that's about to take place. Rising action. This appears after the exposition and ends at the climax. So this is the series of events that build up throughout the story. So we can technically say that the exposition and the rising action would be the introductory parts of the story. This is where everything is starting to build up. Climax. This is the most exciting and important part of the story because by this time, the story has already gotten to its main event or its main idea. So it's like watching a movie and in the beginning starts off very boring. And by the time you reach to the middle of the movie, you're very shocked. You're like, wow, this is interesting. So once you've reached that point, you're at the climax. So the falling action. This is the resolution of the major conflict. Falling action occurs after the climax. So the falling action isn't necessarily the resolution or the conclusion, but it's now bringing you towards the end. The climax has already happened and the story is starting to die down. Resolution. This is the end of the story. It is at this point that you learn what happens to the characters after the conflict is resolved. So the resolution would bring the story or the movie or whatever you're watching to an end. So let's put it all together. The beginning of the story would be the exposition and the rising action. The middle of the story would be the climax. And the end of the story would be the final action and the resolution. Okay, so we're going to determine the sequence of events from our Read Aloud No Show produced by the writing unit from the Department of Education. Okay, so listen to our Read Aloud. The story is entitled No Show, produced by the writing unit from the Department of Education. The Christmas vacation was over. It was the second day of the new year. Smartly dressed students could be seen on every street in Nassau. We arrived at Dame Ivy Dumont Junior High School. We were all excited to see our old friends. We talked about the holidays. Shortly afterwards, the bell rang. We lined up at our classroom door, then followed Miss Bow, our teacher, into the classroom. At first, Miss Bow welcomed us back, then allowed us to talk for a few minutes about our Christmas vacation. She wrapped up by encouraging us to work hard during the coming term. Miss Bow began to call the register. While this was being done, Shakira and I were looking at each other. We couldn't wait to see the reaction of the class when Lynn's name was called. Anne Brown, Miss Bow called. There was no answer. Anne Brown, Miss Bow called, a little louder. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Bow. I'm present, I shouted. Afterwards, she called two names. Then she came to Lynn Payne. There was silence. She called it again. This quietness was soon disrupted when Roy shouted, Miss Bow, she ain't coming back to school no more. She having baby. He continued by naming the boy for whom she was having the baby. Everyone was shocked. You could hear a pin drop. Their mouths dropped open. The shock, however, soon wore off. Then they all began to speak at once. Miss Bow quieted them down, then continued marking the register. Miss Bow thought hard and long before she spoke. I know you said that Lynn is pregnant, but I will have to refer this matter to the guidance counselor. Miss Bow decided that the best way to handle the situation would be to have Mrs. Smith, the counselor, come in and speak to the class. Ms. Smith agreed to speak to the class on Friday morning. She began by pointing out the many disadvantages of getting pregnant while still in school. She explained that since the students have not completed school, they would not have the proper skills to get a job. This means that they would not have enough money to take care of the child. Caring for the child would be very difficult. It would be their responsibility to provide clothing, food, and shelter for the child. Ms. Smith finished her talk with a slide presentation which highlighted sexually transmitted diseases. This is another serious problem among teenagers. The class giggled at some of the pictures at the slide. Ms. Smith had to tell them, be quiet. She ended by encouraging the students to practice abstinence. She promised to be available during the lunch breaks to answer any questions. Okay, so the first strategy used was a graphic aid in which it explained the plot pyramid and roller coaster. Graphic aids are the images that will assist your learners with understanding the text that accompanies the visual aid. By looking at this illustration, students are then able to create their own plot diagram as stated in the objectives. Throughout the strategy, students were then able to retell the story and review the lesson by stating what they have learned. So let's take a look. Plot pyramid. So in the plot diagram, you would notice this pyramid rising up and going down. Look how it starts at the beginning, making its way to the rising action, at the middle, the climax, moving downwards to falling action and the resolution, which is the end. Also, we can take a look at the roller coaster. Think about the time that you went on a roller coaster. The exposition will be the introduction, where the host is telling you to prepare yourself, make sure your seatbelt is on, making sure you're sorted out to go on the ride. Then we reach to the rise in action. This is when the events start to happen. So by the time it's that roller coaster is ready to take off, you're scared, you're nervous, you're second guessing, why did you come on this roller coaster? By the time you reach all the way up, that is the most exciting part of the roller coaster because you're all the way up with no way of getting down unless the roller coaster brings you down. So with the falling action, you're starting to realize that, you know what, it's coming to an end. You're still a bit scared, but it's coming to an end shortly. You're not as scared as you were when you first started. And at the resolution, you reach to the end. So the next strategy presented within this lesson was the reading response journals. The question asked readers what they've read, what they liked best, what they didn't like, why they didn't like it, what did the book remind them of, and why did they think this author wrote this text. Reading response journals is an important strategy for students to write, draw, share opinions, ideas, or respond to texts that they've read. To reflect on this lesson, I thought it was great because in my opinion, literature is one of those subjects where you need strategies and techniques to keep students engaged. The graphic aid allowed students to simulate and fantasize about the roller coaster ride, and the reading response journals allowed students to voice their opinion on how they feel about a certain text. So let's take a look. So we created our plot diagram where we stated the exposition, the rise in action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So use plot elements to retell a story. Can someone tell me what happened in the no-show story from the beginning to the end using elements of plot? What happened in the beginning? What events took place? What was the interesting part? How did the event die down? And what was the resolution? You're basically going to give us a synopsis of the story. Would anyone like to volunteer? Remember, we just broke it down in our plot diagram.
Okay, I'll attempt.
Okay.
That's with Miss Bo, correct?
Right.
Okay, so they appeared at their school. I think it was Ivy Dumont School. They were excited to see their friends. The teacher was calling the roster, the register, and the student was not there because she actually was pregnant, and the other student, Roy, he shouted out, Miss Bo, she ain't coming back because she's pregnant. Then after that, we had the discussion with how she's pregnant and how it's not good to, get pregnant and having to come to school because you miss a lot. Then it was turned over to the guidance counselor, who then prepared a presentation for the students and also told students the importance of abstinence to keep safe from getting pregnant. And then afterwards, she said that if they had any further questions, she would remain behind.
Excellent. You used the plot elements and you retold the story. Okay, students, so you're going to access the Quizlet link to complete today's assignment on the plot. To conclude, let's review what we've learned. What is a plot? Can a student read what is a plot? How about Michaela? Michaela, can you read what is a plot?
A plot is a sequence of events that occur within a story.
Excellent. So these are the events that connect the story from beginning to end. Lashanda, can you read what are the 5 elements of a plot? Is Lashanda here? Okay,
I
so
can read it.
I can
Okay.
read it.
go ahead.
The 5 elements of a plot: exposition, the rise in action, climax, fall in action, and the resolution.
Excellent. And out of all of those elements, can anyone explain one of the elements? What is an exposition, a rise in action, a climax, falling action, or resolution? Anyone? How about Tanisha?
The climax is the part, it's like the juicy part. In other words, it's where everything really takes place. Like in terms of, say, for instance, if we was on a roller coaster, it's that top piece of the story that actually the grounded piece on the discussion of what everyone is talking about, like in the story, how they were talking about the pregnant student. So that would be considered climax.
Excellent. So students, for homework, we're going to take a look at our reading response journals. So based on the story that we've read, you're going to answer the following questions. I just read, you're going to state the name of the story and the author. Then you're going to answer the questions: what I like best about the story, I didn't like the part when, I didn't like it because, this book reminds me of, and I think the author wrote this too. So you're going to answer the following 5 questions for your homework and return to the next class. So thank you so much, students, for today's lesson. Are there any questions on the plot? Excellent. So have a great day. So to conclude, when planning my lessons, I will try my best to include literacy strategies because it really helps students to get a better understanding of the lesson. And the quicker they understand, the quicker we can move on as a group. Literacy strategies are great because they improve students' reading fluency, expand their vocabulary, and increase their confidence. I would recommend that all teachers use literacy strategies and to provide more relatable content when teaching a lesson to assist students with learning and keeping them engaged. This project was a learning experience because it provides you with the necessary tools to become a great teacher.